Good morning, everybody. My name's James, and for the benefit of those listening back to the podcast, you're listening to Ask James, my regular YouTube live stream where I welcome questions from the YouTube community on anything football related. To timestamp this, it's just gone 9:30 a.m. on Friday, February the 14th, which means a happy Valentine's Day to all our viewers and listeners. What are you doing for the wife tonight, James? Well, working, and I've got deadline stream. Deadline stream obviously tonight on YouTube at 5:30 p.m. UK ahead of tonight's Brighton and Chelsea game, which will kick off double game week 25, which features doubles for Liverpool and Aston Villa. The updated team news this morning from Arne Slot is that Cody Gakpo is a doubt for Sunday, and those of us who are watching the game Wednesday night are probably not surprised to hear that news because he did appear to limp off when substituted. I'm probably keeping though. I should imagine. I don't think it'd probably be worth me shoving it around. I do have a big Nicholas Jackson size problem that I need to deal with, and my decision has not been made yet. I will cover questions up until 10:30 a.m. UK time, or unless I get through all the questions before then. Right, first up is Colin Johnson says, morning, mate. Hope you're well. Kirkes or Munoz for Mikalenko? Already have Pickford. Don't want double Everton. Plus, best João Pedro replacement. Own Wood and Isak. Not free hitting. In terms of Kirkes or Munoz, Colin, I mean, you're saying that obviously you're running through game week 29, I presume. That's what you're saying by saying you're not free hitting. Kirkes seems like the more viable solution from that perspective in terms of your cover, running right through for a number of weeks. Again, as I've said several times over the last couple of weeks, I don't mind Dean Howson as a cheaper alternative, and that might free up a little bit more money for you, Colin, in terms of replacement for João Pedro, because if you don't have a lot of money in the bank, there's not a lot of places to go, and therefore arguably I would stick with Southampton away next week on the agenda. If you can afford to get up, consider it. As I said, I've got a Jackson problem and I haven't decided what to do yet. I'm not going to until I've got all the team news. It may be that I try and force Ollie Watkins in. That would be a -4 for me if Emery gives the complete all clear, although I suspect he won't this afternoon. I could go something like Gordon to a Bournemouth midfielder and then Jackson to Watkins for a -4. That would obviously hold some temptation for me. Chris Wood is an option, bearing in mind the period of sort of 29 to 34 appeals for me way more than what's about to come up now. Mateta is an option, but the blanking game week 29 doesn't help. I think if they were playing in 29, that's where I'd be going, is Mateta, so I completely understand, Colin, the Munoz interest. The one I might go to today is Cunha, which doesn't make a huge amount of sense with him playing Liverpool next week. But I think I was always liable to possibly end up with Cunha in 28 or 29 anyway. So it might just be that I'm going early. I wouldn't even definitely start him this way. I probably would still start him because talisman on pens. But it's more Wolves fixtures really begin to ease up kind of every week, gets better and better over the next couple of weeks. Then there's a great run, game at 28 to 34. So it'd just be making a move that I was kind of planning later on earlier. And that's where I'm short of transfers, where I haven't got the chips. I maybe need to consider that sort of move because it's going to probably save me a transfer further down the line. I think though, Connie, if you can't go up from João Pedro to, I mean, you wouldn't go João Pedro to Cunha now. It doesn't make sense. You'd probably make that. I would probably recommend that in game week 27 if you can get up. If you can't get up at all, I think you're just sticking with him, mate. I think. I hope he plays tonight. You might get team news that he starts tonight. The Southampton game appeals next week, and then I think it's move on from there. So consider Howson if it moves the money for you at all, Colin. Billy Taylor says, morning Jimbo, happy Valentine's, you too, buddy. Planning to wildcard in 32 and looking to bring in one of Kluivert, Rodgers or Nkunku. How would you rank them in terms of preference? Well, Rodgers, if I didn't own, I think it's the standout for this week, and I think it's fine for a couple. Blank 29, fixtures not great, and the next really good one is Southampton away in 32 when you're probably going to wildcard. So I'm not sure that I'd chase that personally if I didn't already own. Kluivert, I think, really appeals as a good long-term option. I'm not sure if his other half has had the baby yet, but I imagine he will play tomorrow. I know it's an away game, but it's not a long distance, so I imagine that he will play. for Bournemouth tomorrow. Nkunku is interesting. We always suspected, and we pretty much said it through the first kind of 2 months of the season, and then it wasn't really a discussion anymore, but we kind of maintained during the first part of the season there will be a time for Christopher Nkunku this season. The performance at Brighton in the FA Cup Saturday night wasn't great. I didn't think that he was great. Maresca has spoken about options and looking at alternatives to play in that position. I don't think it's black and white that Nkunku just goes in the team and plays all the games. I'm not convinced about that at the moment. So I feel like it needs a couple of games of information for Nkunku, and therefore maybe go 27. So maybe the right solution for you, Billy, might be Rodgers now. Then have a look at maybe moving to Nkunku in 27 if that feels right. But if it doesn't, there's every chance you're going to wish you just went for the Bournemouth player. And I think for me, as I'd already mentioned, that admittedly I already have Rodgers, but I think if I was to try and force Watkins in today, or if Eddie Howe was to tell me, which he won't, but if he was to tell me, yeah, Anthony Gordon's out, I think I'm going to Bournemouth mid and most likely Kluivert for me, first and foremost. So I'm pretty much going to say Kluivert, I think, Billy. That's probably what I'd be doing at this stage. I would maybe be looking, Rodgers 2 and Nkunku 27, possibly. FPL Developer says, hi James, good morning. What is your preferred Bournemouth midfielder? Is Utara worth a risk if plan is to wildcard 32? I think that even Evan Nilsson is back. Brooks is the one who loses a spot. Not necessarily on Brooks, the one losing the spot, because Brooks might lose that spot to Tavernier before that, right? Marcus Tavernier was back on the bench last week. So I think prior to injuries, Tavernier was ahead of Brooks. I think Brooks has done quite well. So I wouldn't look at it necessarily that way. I think if you're just running up towards the blank and looking to wildcard quite soon afterwards, around about 32 where you are, Utara is possibly okay. I think you could only really have confidence in Utara up to 29. 32 is what, sort of weekend of 12th of April, which actually, when you look at it, is 4 weeks after game week 29 in terms of the physical calendar. Yeah, I don't think there's anything to say. Evan Nilsson might not be back by that point, personally. That's why, for me, who's, again, short of chips, Utara's not really a consideration for me. Not that I don't think he's a good asset, I do. I just think it might end up being a little bit more short-term. So my preference would be Kluivert or Semenyo. Again, we'll listen to what Iriola says today, but I think unless there's genuine, real concerns, I think I don't think Kluivert does play tomorrow. And I'm sure from his Instagram he's going to tell us if his other half's had the baby or not. We wish the Kluivert family well. Kluivert would be the preference for me at this stage over Semenyo, and then Utara's third for me. But again, if you're just running up sort of 28 and you're literally just looking at the immediate, then I think Utara is right at the top alongside them. Demetrius G says, who gets more points in the next two, Nwaneri or Dango Utara? Also planning to use whichever one I buy in game week 29 and game week 30 before wildcard. So worth factoring whether they still play then. Yeah, again, another one here is obviously the influence of Saka. I know there was some rumour that went around yesterday that he might not play for like another 2 months. Clayton suggested in the podcast we did on Wednesday with no ITK on it that he thought there was every chance that Saka wouldn't play till April, which obviously you're looking at sort of game week 30. There might be an influence in terms of what Arsenal do in the Champions League, how quickly they throw him back in. I think with Nwaneri, you just have to be a little bit concerned in terms of his age. He's an amazing talent, legitimately, and he's almost definitely going to start tomorrow. But how is that sustainable for him? They will have obviously the last 16 in the Champions League between game weeks, so either side of game week 28 and then obviously before the blank of 29. Like, what's the impact of him in terms of his load? What if he has to play Wednesday, Saturday, Tuesday, and then the blank's 29? Yeah, there's no reason for me, truthfully, as I don't get Nwaneri as a 4.5 midfielder, right? But I think he needs to go in as your 8th attacker. You're saying you want to use. In terms of Utara, it's kind of just said up to 29, fine. 30, bit more doubtful. When you look at 30 as well, Bournemouth's first league game after the FA Cup quarter-final, And you think the FA Cup quarter final might be really important for them. Obviously, if they beat Wolves in the 5th round, if Evan Nilsson's back, is Ipswich at home the sort of fixture to ease him back in? The answer's arguably yes, isn't it? So I think with what you're doing, Dimitri, I'd probably chase the upside of Utara, because I think in the immediate that's a little bit clearer. Just because of Nwaneri and not knowing if with the Champions League around those fixtures if he'll be able to play all the games. So in the immediate, the slight preference would be Otara, but I don't think you could look at either of them players and be absolutely certain that they're going to play in game week 30. It also says I'm pretty set on selling Isak to fund Haaland in game week 29 and 30. Does that make Isak to Watkins, if fit, an easy move, as I don't need to worry about holding Isak's value? But you may want to. You just said you want to kind of wildcard not long after game week 30. There's a strong possibility you're going to want Alexander Isak as part of that. So, if you're chopping the million worth of profit at the moment, I think that does come into play and factor in. I would recommend listening to Tuesday's Clash of Correspondence if you haven't, which was recorded obviously prior to Manchester City lost to Real Madrid, but there was quite a bit of laughing between me, Johnny and Sai at that point in terms of the prospect of not having Alexander Isak this week, because there's every chance he's going to do well tomorrow. There would be but let me put it this way. If I was in a position where Jackson was fit and I'd have been happy to keep and Gakpo was fully fit, there would have been no consideration for me to move Isak to Watkins. That said, I probably don't have Haaland as part of my plan at the moment. It's not to say I won't end up there, but it's not part of the plan at the moment. It arguably would need something like Isak to get injured for me, because I definitely want him straight after game week 29. As a reminder, Brentford at home 30, Leicester away, United at home, an impossible double. So I don't want to cut him. I don't want to cut him too good. I said in pre-season, I think if he'd have been 11 million going into game week 1, I'd have started with him. So, and I think he's playing like a player that really should be that sort of value at kind of a minimum now. He should get a massive price hike next year, really. I wouldn't want to cut Isak, mate. But if it's part of your plan to cut and go to Haaland, then I accept that. But I don't think if you look across the next 4 weeks as a group, I'm not sure definitively that Watkins is better. Do we even know that Watkins is going to start tomorrow at the moment? We don't, as it stands. And as I said earlier, I'm not convinced that Unai Emery is going to tell us either. Sean said, hi James, as of right now, who would be your table bonus assistant manager pick for game week 26? As of right now, as the table stands, and obviously this could move. I mean, if the positions are all the same, you've only got bonus, I think, from the bottom 5 teams at the moment. I think that's correct. This is probably Akira McKenna against Tottenham. Now, that could change off the table this weekend. I've mentioned Van Nistelrooy against Brentford. There's a few others, and that's the Friday night fixture. People next Friday night, if people want some interest in that sort of thing. The one that could obviously open up, as we discussed on Monday's Chip Strategy podcast, is Eddie Howe. Obviously, alternative Guardiola could open up as well. And I would probably prefer to go Howe or Guardiola in the circumstances that it was them, rather than a McKenna or Van Nistelrooy if it lands for them. But I think this was always something that I didn't like about game week 26. If it lands incredibly where Eddie Howe is 8th against Forest, who are 3rd, then that's clear and away the one for me. I know there's plenty that would like Guardiola 6th against Liverpool 1st. I'm less so, but I would prefer that over, say, the McKenna or Van Nistelrooy options. So the City-Newcastle result tomorrow may well have an influence in terms of what your decision is going to be on that. Next up is JP. He says, morning mate, if you had all your chips left, how would you play it? Team is relatively ahead of the template, got 123 points with no chips this game week. Some of us got 126 and a red arrow, mate. I discussed this on Monday towards the end of the podcast. I don't want to cover it in too much detail again because my position on that wouldn't have changed. So if you want more of my view on that, obviously go back to the end of Monday's Chip Strategy pod. But I would be triple captain now. And loosely, with the ability to change, I'd probably be looking wildcard 32, bench boost 33, free hit 34, assistant manager between 35 and 38. Loosely, that's what I'd be looking at. But I wouldn't have to be committed to anything other than making the decision to triple captain now. That would be my choice, is just go for Mo now, triple captain. So Luke Boy 123 says, morning James, how are you? What was your overall reflection on the Merseyside derby? Intriguing, very different game of football to what we normally see in the Premier League. It was quite needly. I wouldn't want to watch that type of game every week, but in terms of the intensity, the rivalry, all that, it created an interesting spectacle. It was a little bit short of, in terms of goalmouth quality, I think, from both teams. Everton certainly deserved the draw at the end. I don't think they would have been very unfortunate to lose the game, because I think they limited Liverpool quite well. I don't think Liverpool were at their best by any means. I think it was a very difficult game to referee. I think the game, as I said, had real needle in it. That made it a really tough challenge. It didn't make it a great watch, but I also enjoyed it in the sense it was quite different to the majority of games we'd normally see. Everton absolutely deserved the late equaliser. Diljit07 says, good morning James, hope you're well. If you had triple Liverpool and Rodgers, which I do, is it too passive to roll? Bringing in Villa assets causes problems for 29, but I'm at 1.1 million overall and struggling to move up. No, as I said, the Jackson injury might open up that I end up with Watkins by the end of today. I'm not in love with it. I'm kind of really need to feel some true confidence from Unai Emery. I know it's costing me another transfer down the line, right? You have to weigh that in if that's worth attacking. But then if I get Cunha and I maybe benched him this week, then that would maybe feel... It's not say I would. It'd be between Cunha and Diallo for me. I've really not thought that far ahead yet. It would be close between the two of them. That would maybe push me to think, yeah, Watkins is worth the gamble. It would be the -4 now, so I wouldn't be any less on a transfer later on. But then I'm buying Cunha later on, possibly, when I could just buy him now. So still be saving one, and I spend an extra 4-point hit on it. So then is Watkins over Cunha on kind of like the next 2 game weeks, probably worth 8 points more. I'm not sure that he is. If I haven't got the confidence that he starts tomorrow, that's probably a no when I'm saying it out loud. So no, I think there's issues defensively with Villa at the moment. I think there's every chance Disasai will play twice in the double, who's really cheap, but he don't keep clean sheets at the best of time. The Villa fans will tell you that. And he's ineligible next week if you needed to use him, so that would be problematic. Don't like anything else defensively. Wouldn't want to pay for Martinez at his price. You've now got the threat of Asensio and Rashford, which complicates things. No, I think it's perfectly fine to let it go, mate. I do. Sean says, follow-up question. It seems the general consensus right now is play through 29, wildcard 31, 32, bench boost 33, free hit 34. A number of caveats, but would that be your approach with those ships still in hand? Literally, it's just covered, Sean, but thank you. Nemanja Kovac says, what do you think about João Pedro minutes going forward? Would you rather switch to the likes of Cunha in 2 weeks, or maybe wait until blank game at 29, try to place Haaland in that position by selling Palmer? Again, I see the obvious appeal of Haaland 29 and 30, goes without saying. But yeah, Cole Palmer's got Southampton, Leicester 27, 28, and really good fixtures from 30 onwards. Admittedly, no double now, but am I happy to have Cole Palmer away to Fulham with single fixture 33? Yeah, that's fine. Covers me 34 as well. So there's an influence there where I just would not want to cut Cole Palmer at all. I wouldn't expect him to return at Arsenal, but I would not want to cut him. So therefore, you can probably guess what my favouritism would be on that. And I'd already mentioned the idea of João Pedro 2, Cunha in 27. That's probably what I'd be lining up. JP says, keep or sell Gordon to Utara. So, look, Eddie Howe's unlikely to give us anything. We know how that works with Eddie Howe. He's going to keep his cards pretty close to his chest unless it's kind of confirmed that Gordon has a real issue, in which case it's obviously a sell. I have been of the opinion, and again we discussed this on Tuesday's Clash of Correspondence, that actually he could do quite well tomorrow at Manchester City. Anything that's direct running against Manchester City has a chance, arguably even more so in a game at the Etihad because the space is even easier to find. Notice Eddie Howe's press conference is 9:30, so might even have something before the end of this stream. Actually, I will go and have a double check before we finish. Good fixture next week, Forest at home. One benefit of cutting him would be it might open up Howe assistant manager if you're sitting there with Hall and Isak as well. Liverpool away 27 is obviously not a great fixture. West Ham away 28 is okay. Then there's the blank 29. And they don't see me carrying him through the blank 29, so you do think maybe just cut. But it might be a little bit more information is possibly useful. I do still think there is, and I must stress, a tiny chance, would probably need to be announced today, that Newcastle Palace could go into 27. It won't, as an additional, as we discussed on Monday, it won't go into game at 28 because I completely forgot that Newcastle playing at West Ham on the Monday night that week. There's a small chance, again, I think it'd have to be arranged today, that the fixture could go into 27. I have that as a minor consciousness in the back of my mind. Admittedly, the first part of that double would be Liverpool away, but then in that case, it's no longer a bad fixture, is it? It's the additional fixture. I don't see me making it through 29 with Gordon, so I completely understand the reason to move on. And there's every chance I'll be moving it on today. As said, particularly if I do determine, right, I do want to go to Watkins. Gordon, under that circumstance, is definitely the fall guy. My plan prior to the Jackson injury news, truthfully, had been to go Gordon to Kluivert this week anyway. So I have no problem with the idea of moving that on, mate. Chris Bruce says, morning. I've been top of mini league since game week 2, gone from 50-point lead to 30 odd. Okay. Still wild card and bench boost and free hit left. Any advice to staying at the top? Do I cover rivals or just go for what I think will do well? Chris, you've gained a lead by doing what? Paying too much attention for others or playing it your way, mate? I'd suggest it's probably from playing it your way. Too long to go to be overly concerned about others, I think, at this stage. Points is your best friend here. Hanny says, hi James, play Howson or Robinson? Yeah, tight one that, isn't it? I think Forest might win tomorrow. Which Forest fans will be not happy to hear, because every time I tip them to get beat, they tend to win, actually. Gosh, that's a really tough one this week, isn't it? I have Castagne. I would definitely pick Howson over Castagne. I'm probably going to start Castagne this week. Robinson's different kettle of fish, though, isn't it? I'd probably edge for Robinson just about. That's really tough, that one, I think. Billy says, I'm sure you've done this a few times, but can you explain what would have to happen for Newcastle versus Palace staying 29? They'd have to, well, the first thing is they'd have to both lose in the FA Cup 5th round. So since Monday's podcast, the draw with them both having home fixture and Palace having obviously winning Monday night, then having a really strong fixture. Obviously the chance of it staying in 29 are now extremely unlikely. We were probably looking at a 5% on Monday, and I'd say it's less than that now. Because not only do they both have to lose in the FA Cup 5th round, the game also needs to be arranged there. So they could lose in the 5th round, there's still no guarantee the game would be arranged for there. So I think now at this stage, Billy, that's extremely unlikely. Palace have gone strong in the Cups this season, and I know there'll be a quite a bit of rivalry, Palace-Millwall and stuff. I'd be very surprised if Millwall won at Crystal Palace. I'd be surprised if Brighton won at Newcastle, by the way. So to get both of those results feels pretty unlikely at this stage. And the game to be arranged there at 4 weeks' notice. And obviously if they both go out, 33 is still open for that fixture anyway. So yeah, it's very unlikely, Billy. It's still possible. It's still possible, but it's very unlikely. JP says, what City players are you bringing in around game week 29 and how we plan to do it? It might be none, mate. That is a genuine possibility for me. It really might be none. As I said earlier, I think for me with Haaland and trying to do it with free transfers, I'm just going to break too much else. And I keep looking at it and thinking, well, if I did captain Acuna or Wood and they outscore Haaland that week, how many transfers have I wasted? I don't really want to lose Mo. So I'd be happy to take Haaland on with Mo or Isak in game week 30 anyway. I do intend to carry those two through. Foden not starting the other night and the amount of bodies City have back is a bit meh. Because I think if I stuck him in, I'd be tempted to go with Foden as a captaincy and then carry. But if they've got all these attacking options, we've got Oscar Bob to add to this in the next couple of weeks. Not a lover of that. Even more so if City did turn it round against Real Madrid, because they obviously have a Champions League game in the midweek before 29. I don't think they'll turn it round. So then there's full break. Yeah, I'm not convinced. No, not convinced on that at all. So the most likely City player for me in 29 is Vardiol. You can definitely see me going Trent to Vardiol in 29. So Vardiol was the most likely one. As it stands now, unless something changes, there is no other Manchester City player that would be of any interest to me at this moment. Next up is Joel Stockdale. Morning, James. Hope you're well. Currently ranked 388 in the world. Any advice to help me win FPL? Yeah, keep doing what you're doing, mate. You've obviously got to where you're doing by playing it your way, I'm going to guess, Joe, or copying someone else. If you're copying someone else, keep doing it right. Keep doing what's been working for you, mate. Hang on. It's too early, I think, to be going like mad out aggressively in terms of going differential or anything like that. Stick at it, mate. Stick at it. Keep doing the things that's got you into this strong position at this stage, mate. Adrian Stanker says, hi, James. Just a quick benching dilemma for this game week. Anderson or Nico Williams? To add to the dilemma, the two defenders are facing each other. Yep, of course. Close again. I guess ultimately, what do you think is going to happen in the game? I've said I think Forest might win, but I'd add the caveat that, it wouldn't surprise me if Fulham won 1-0, wouldn't surprise me if Forest won 1-0, right? Which one's more likely to get the haul? I think it's Anderson. I think I've not seen it for a while, but there was certainly a period in the autumn spell where Forest were having the odd difficulty with corners. I'm just thinking back now. Southampton scored a corner against them a couple of weeks ago as well. Just on that, slight preference for Anderson, just because I think there's a little bit more prospect of the big haul. Lamichi says, morning, James. With the Gakpo doubt, would you move him to Raul Jimenez to activate slot assistant manager? Would deviate from plans to get Wood and Haaland in 29, but wonder if it's too good an opportunity to pass up. I'm going to say no, Lamichi, because I could do that sort of thing, right? And that's not on the table for me at this moment. I think the big problem, I think, for Jimenez with me is that's a definite sell in game week 30. Walking into Arsenal and Liverpool straight afterwards. And where am I going to from now? Doesn't look particularly straightforward or easy, because the forwards I want are probably about 2 million more than Jimenez. Now, if I'm going Haalandless 29, there's every chance I might have that sort of money. I wouldn't rule out considering a path for me for Jimenez today. But I think, honestly, even if I went Jimenez, I'm not convinced I'd activate the Arsenal at the moment. I just really don't love game week 26. Would be the biggest thing for me. I don't love it. Now, there's a chance it's going to land incredible. And like I said, if the Eddie Howe one opens up, it'll open up because Emery's done incredible. So would I activate on Eddie Howe if they had Forest at home bonus next week? Maybe, but then I'd also be thinking, bloody hell, there's no way I'm catching the guys who've just gone Emery here as well. And Emery, if this circumstance happens, people are going to want to go Eddie Howe next week who have activated it, I'm sure. And so the advice to people, by the way, would be if you're on Emery, if you're going Emery this week and on the Arseman, leave enough money next week to potentially go Emery to Howe in terms of whatever your plays are this week. Of course, you can take a hit to make that happen, and arguably that would maybe be worth it under the circumstances. No, it's 26 is I don't like it, mate. I don't like it. So no, I get Jimenez is still on the table for me, but I just know if I go him, he's got to move on in game week 30. Muniz is there as a little bit of a threat as well. Yeah, I think it's probably a no on Jimenez from me. Hanny says, would you move Rodgers next game week and double on Bournemouth mids? Who are your favourite two? For me, because I've got to look a little longer term, as I explained earlier, it's Kluivert and Semenyo for me. I do think Utara is just as good at them over this next period of sort of the next 3, 4, and probably 5, including game at 29. Looking a bit further on, I just cannot afford, under my circumstance, to take the chance on him. Nwaneri kind of falls into that similar line for me as well. Don't think I can do it. Matthias Tell would have been another one. I think if Tottenham had doubled this week, I'd be like, yeah, okay, I can punt it now, but where does he fit in once players are back fit? Is he left, forward? Not sure I'd have the true info. Then there's a complication of Tottenham prioritising Europa games. So things that are kind of like a chance like that, just kind of thinking a bit deeper about things, don't appeal to me. That doesn't mean for you that you shouldn't consider Utara. As said, I think in the next immediate, I think he's as good as a prospect as Kluivert and Semenyo over the next 4 or 5. Beyond, I'd be going to one of the other two. Hanny says, bench Bumo or Wood. Listen to Wednesday's Clayton and James show. We went through a host of benching dilemmas. I think because I've said about I think Forest might win, I think I'd go Wood, Yeah, that is so rough though. And I know some people have that debate. I possibly just would. just as I said, I think Forest might win this weekend. I actually think West Ham might beat Brentford to add to that. I'm pretty sure those are going to be predictions, subject to the team news, obviously. But I'm pretty sure that's what I'm going to predict on the deadline stream later, is West Ham to win and Fulham to win. Steve asks, his morning mate, keep Gordon or transfer to Cliver. 1 free transfer, play Pedro or Langa. If I had Pedro, I'd probably play. In terms of the transfer, you're kind of covered. It's not something I'd rule out today, and that Steve was my preference transfer in mine's 48 hours ago, so I'm not going to tell you no. Just obviously keep an eye on the Bournemouth Clivert news today. Andrew Parker says, morning sir, a couple of headaches this game with Gakpo a doubt. Eze and João Pedro minutes are concerned now. I could do Eze to Dango Utara or Nwaneri, and then Gakpo to Watkins. Or João Pedro to Mateta with that money, too much. No, don't mind moves, mate, but ultimately, Andrew, your strategy here is really important in terms of 29. You're going to leave yourself too short if you're like treble Liverpool and you've got Palace on top of Villa, etc., and Newcastle. Ultimately, I think Mateta, if it wasn't for the blank, as if Palace were playing 29, I'd be going Jackson to Mateta today, definitely. That's the one I'd be doing. But he does blank in 29, and I need to consider that on my path. So I think you do as well, Andrew, and that's probably going to impact where you're at. Again, on Dango, Nwaneri, how far are you sitting further ahead? On Eze, wait for what Glasner says today, but I think that he'll probably start tomorrow, Eze, and therefore I don't think that the other two are definitively better when you'll probably have a emotionally, even if not physically, an emotionally fatigued Everton go to Selhurst Park tomorrow. Nikolai Utne says, hi James, is there a conversation to be had about a wildcard in 27-28 attacking some fixture swings? City, Wolves, depending on form in next couple, etc. I've got bench boost and I'm left, and assistant manager left. Big rank gain needed. Yeah, so with that in mind, Nikolai, I think you need more information about 33. You 28, you'll have more information. 27, you won't. I think in terms of City and Wolves and their swings, there are probably only 3 players across those two teams that I'd be interested in, and it's the 3 City I mentioned. Foden is now maybe a concern. Vardiol, Haaland, and then from Wolves it's just Aït-Nouri and Cunha. I don't know, I want a wild card on Wolves having a fixture swing. If I was going to do that, I'd probably definitely 28 rather than 27. City still go to Forest that week. Whereas what you said in the likes of Liverpool got Southampton at home. Information is king here, Nicola. I get you want to chase, but getting it right with them chips is going to give you jumps, mate. And I don't think if you wildcard in those 2 weeks, you're not going to have the best picture for what you want to do with those chips. Nick Griffiths says, morning, James. It's the week of strategy, so a strategy question it is. Do we know the teams that are likely to double across 36, 37, 38 and the possibility with this? Thinking of assistant manager across this stretch. So nothing's changed from Monday's strategy podcast, Nick. At the moment, the projection would be for Newcastle Ipswich to go into that week. I explained on Monday's podcast reasons why I suspect that it could even be 35 rather than 36. It's thinking about Newcastle's fixtures. I think there is obviously a strong possibility that any fixture moved for the FA Cup final in game week 37 is brought forward to 36. I, on Monday's podcast, stressed concerns about teams maybe having to play a midweek fixture 3 days before an FA Cup final doesn't feel right. And therefore, I do think there is still a strong possibility that game week 36 wouldn't have any extra fixtures. And therefore, there may not be any extra fixtures at all across 36 and 37. There obviously won't be in game week 38. So I can't guarantee it, Nick. Can't guarantee it. But what I can definitely say is I do think that there will be assistant manager opportunities there at the end, with 1 or 2 teams potentially on the beach, 1 or 2 teams fighting for certain positions within the league where stuff can still be attacked. I think under that circumstance, Nick, it may well be a case of just jumping to a different manager each week and taking each week as an individual merit. That might be what it ends up being. Generally could be. There is also the possibility across that period you could have something like, it's not impossible, if we think about this logically, it's not impossible that Newcastle could say double win 35-36, right? The example of that being, they get to the FA Cup semi-final, they arrange to play Palace in 33. The Ipswich game goes into 35 because they want to bring the the Arsenal fixture, which is their scheduled 37 game, forward to 36 in the event they make the FA Cup final. Like, we couldn't rule that out as a possibility. Under that circumstance, unless I'm wildcarding 35, it's how, and then how blank. So it's obviously something else, right? I think that sort of circumstance is quite unlikely, by the way, but it is a possibility. I can't give you anything, Nick, is the honest answer. I can't give you anything at this stage that I can say to you yes or no specifically in terms of the number of fixtures there at the end. 36 could easily have 4 teams double who then blank in 37. 36 could easily have no teams double. That's kind of where we're at the moment. I don't think 36 is likely to have more than 4 teams double. That feels really unlikely at this stage, unless something goes wrong that we obviously can't control or can't foresee. Tom G says, hi James, I have Havertz but 0 free transfers. I was just going to bench him, play Ahmad and deal with it game week 27, but now Gakpo is apparently doubt also. Havertz out worth a -4 for Wood or Cunha. For Cunha, it feels like a no. Because the fixture would a little bit more justification, but then he's walking into obviously a couple of tough ones afterwards as well. But I think possibly yes. One benefit, Tom, to consider, if you take the -4 now, it will give you an extra transfer later. So the value of that arguably is kind of the cost in terms of free transfers, right? So it's not quite an effective -4. What I mean by that is, obviously, if you take the -4 now and you're running through, say, game week 29, you've got an additional free transfer to deal with something that might save you a hit later on. So that's something potentially to consider. Whereas if you just leave it, you might be short of a free transfer in future weeks. And therefore, if it becomes a -4 anyway, it may be something you should just arguably dealt with now. I think if I had to go Wood or Cunha now on the hit, it's interesting how that psychologically impacts, because I've spoken about Cunha for me, but layered that way makes me feel more like Wood. Just because the fixture is better this weekend, but it's still not great. Luke Stevenson says, hi James, should I sell Gordon for a Bournemouth midfielder to bench Wood on Bumo? Or should I just bench Gordon and roll the transfer? Also thoughts on tracking childbirth help with team days. That if people are sharing what's happening with their children across their social media platforms, then people are obviously going to be aware in any case. Getting a Bournemouth midfielder to bench Wood or Bumo, no, I think I'd leave it be. You might be really happy to start Anthony Gordon next week. I'd probably leave that be. James Hill says, morning James, cheers for the great content as always. Would you do Ahmad to Dango and bench Wood? Did we not all just see Chris Wood get a hat-trick in the last league game? I mean, I think I would play Wood over Utara anyway. Just clear talisman. Clear. So, no. Billy Taylor says, rank the following on how much they annoy you on the stream. 1, asking if player X is essential. 2, asking about a benching dilemma on screen. 3, asking your advice on moves the person's already made. Do you know what? I think it's the asking on moves that people have already made. I just think, what's the point? You've already made the move. What did you think about... It's just like, I just never want to be the guy that goes, I hate it. That's so horrible to tell, mate, you made that move and I hate it. But then I'm put on the spot. So then I'm put on the spot where I might have to lie. So that's why I dislike that one the most. People know that I don't like the word essential. So the benching dilemma on screen, yeah, maybe people don't see it. Okay. People might be blind. Roseanne says, is it worth -4 to buy Watkins for Jackson? I have 6 players blanking in game with 29. I can't really answer that, Roseanne, because it might be something that I do myself and I haven't decided. So I don't want to say no and then I end up doing it myself, because that is a possibility. Jackson has to go. That's clear. So if it's a -4 for you anyway to move it on, then, you know, Watkins this week is, as it stands, going to be as good a choice as any, isn't it? Roseanne also says, Graham Potter assistant manager this week, everyone ignoring. Yeah, I don't hate that. I don't think it's better than the Emery choice personally, but as I said, I do think West Ham might win tomorrow, and following Everton's draw the other night, it is now bonus fixture, Potter at home to Brentford. Yeah, do you know what? For single game week fixtures, you're not going to get that many better than that. I got a line on Joel Linton from Eddie Howe that they hope he'll be back for the Carabao Cup final. As it stands, I've not seen anything on the mention of Anthony Gordon. Oh, okay, here we go. They got this off of Fantasy Football Scout. So Anthony Gordon should be fine to face Manchester City. Sven Botman likely to miss the game week, but will not be out long term. Dan Burn could be available this weekend. Maybe too soon for Harvey Barnes. Wasn't expecting Harvey Barnes back this soon either anyway. So, I mean, Howe's saying Anthony Gordon should be fine. He should be fine, but he might also be lying. So, yeah, I'm probably going to stick with Gordon. So that means I'm probably just dealing with my Jackson problem. So it means it probably won't be Watkins for me. I don't think. I do know that if I'm attacking Bournemouth, I want to do it now, but I'm not sure under this circumstance when I think Gordon might actually do well tomorrow if that -4 is right. Unless I truly deem that it's got to be Watkins. If I deem that, then yes, it is. So Anthony Gordon's repeat looks like he is fine to play for Newcastle tomorrow. Tom G, I think I've covered yours, sorry, a while ago. Damien Bruns says, morning James, would you sell Foden for a Bournemouth attacker? Would I sell Foden for a Bournemouth attacker? Probably yes, actually. With no guarantee that he'll play tomorrow. Probably yes, actually. I think I probably would. Would it take Clive or Semenyo? Unless there's reason for me to truthfully fear having Cliver for this game week with any information that becomes available during the course of today, that is my preference at the moment. Lorenz says Emery for a -4 or move Moyes to Potter for 2 bonus games. Yeah, but second one's Arsenal way. Let's be honest, that's pretty unlikely, isn't it? There's you've got Potter against Brentford this week. Great to attack for a bonus next week. Not so in love with that. Truthfully, if I was on Moyes, I'd be moving it on to Emery. I think even yes for the -4. That's probably what I'd be doing. Rick 20 says, hi James, keep Gakpo even though he's a doubt, or swap him for Watkins if fit, or swap Gakpo to a game week 29 player as I won't be using free hit in game week 29. I'm probably going to keep Gakpo, I think. I think there was always a strong possibility in my mind that he maybe wasn't going to play both fixtures this game week anyway, just because of the turnaround and to give Jota coming back. I think it was clear that to attack him for 25, I wouldn't be buying him now, clearly. I don't know if there's enough up in moving him on, mate. Because if he did start away to Wolves Sunday, that's enough. That's enough. And he probably doesn't at this moment, by the way. I think at this moment I'm gonna leave it be unless there's genuine real reason for me to have concern. Again, for me there's the influence of it. It's probably a hit if I went from him, because I've got to deal with Jackson first. It's probably then a hit from someone like him to Wood. For me, I could obviously drop Jackson down and then one of them up to Watkins and then down to like a Jimenez as well. Don't like that kind of path, to be honest. So I'm going to skip, I think. So it's probably similar advice at this moment. Taj Adams says, now that Gakpo is a doubt, should I sell to Cunha or Mateta and move Moyes to slot or stick with Emery? But wow, what's Gakpo got to do with Emery? Yeah, definitely. The Emery, that would be the priority for me of everything else. If you're on the route to get Unai Emery as assistant manager, that would supersede anything else happening in the team this week, and that would be priority, and I'd stick with that. Thinking cap FPL, you plan to do Jackson to Watkins? I'm not planning to, but I won't promise that I won't. When I sit here for the deadline stream later today, I'll know what I'm doing. So it's not like secret squirrel. I just haven't decided yet. FPL Don says, hi James, would you do Saar to Utara for a -4 now if it saves you a -4 in game week 29? Yeah, probably. But then it's a decent fixture for Saar this week, isn't it? I know it's been a letdown, hasn't it? But Everton at home, as I said, probably a mentally tired Everton. I think because of the fixture, I wouldn't do it. But I understand your point. So on your point, yes, but I don't think I'd sell him this week. Damien Bryn says, if the result doesn't fall for table bonus on Howe in 26, which other manager would you recommend? Big ups, mate. Thank you, Damien, for your question. I did cover that a little bit earlier, so I'm going to skip, mate. Yahya Fazani says, I have Watkins, Rogers, Isak, Hall, Gordon, Salah, Gakpo, third Paul slot. I have all chips except the assistant manager and pretty bad rank and want to catch up. Thoughts on free hit 29? He had a discussion with one of our patrons last night. So I think most people should try and run through game week 29. But this patron had treble Liverpool, treble Newcastle, certainly some Villa, at least Rogers, and Munoz and Mateta. And we were analysing it in terms of what to do next. And I was like, I really think that you should be free hitting in 29. So what's right for, in terms of what I favour, other people being other situations. In terms of what you've got there, yeah, you've got a number. But the fact that you haven't got any Palace as part of that, I'd still at this moment be planning to run through 29 as it stands. These other scenarios is had a cut of Palace as well. And they've got good fixtures in the immediate, and they've got Southampton away in 30. So free hitting 29 really does look right. If you've it's Palace is the one that really swings it, because I think people have already got coverage of Liverpool, Newcastle, and obviously tempted by Villa now as well. So what I would say, yeah, and as the discussion we'd had last night as well, was it is beginning to look like 33, 34 will be easier to manage without a free hit. It will still be best to use a free hit, I think, for the majority over one of those 2 game weeks. But I do think it will be easier to manage. So if it lands best for you for free hit 29, I don't mind it. One thing that I really dislike about free hit 29 is the prospect of going Haaland for captaincy in 29 and then not having Haaland the week after for Leicester at home. That would drive me bonkers. John Bailey says, hi James, I had Moyes for assistant manager 24. I don't love Emery for 25 as pretty much banks a transfer for another manager in 26. Is there an option you prefer for 25, 26, even if single game week? No. No, there isn't, because I think the path that this is committed to, John, I would be chasing the dream. And the dream is that Unai Emery smashes you in about 30 points, and then that potentially then opens up Eddie Howe for a bonus in the next game week. And then if you've done that from Moyes, you are potentially looking at assistant manager return that will not be beaten. And I mean that. It will not be beaten. I got asked by someone a couple of weeks ago, like, what's the biggest chase move you could do at the moment? It's that. It needs to fall into place massively, but the upside is a joke if it works out. Joke. It's every possibility. Well, it's not every possibility, but let me put it this way. If those who are on Emery are moving to Howe in the next game week, there is every chance they will finish their 3-week period on assistant manager, going Moyes, Emery to Howe, and genuinely finishing on sort of 70 plus. As possible, and I don't think that would be bigger. That would be bigger than I think any of the scores last year. It probably is ones that you combined for, maybe were, but I think Glasner was in the 60s, wasn't it? Was the best of a 3-week period last year. So to chase the possibility of that, if I'd committed to this Moyes route, I would have absolutely no doubt about it. Now, for me, who's not already on the chip, I'm like you. I don't actually truthfully love the Emery move this week, but if I'd committed to the path, I'd be doing it. The reason I don't love the Emery path is I don't think this will open up for Eddie Howe, because I don't think Villa will beat Liverpool. But I'd definitely be chasing it under that circumstance. Danny says, would you take a final FPL rank number 1 if it meant for the next year your sweat would be mayonnaise? No, mate, FPL is just not that important to me, mate. Hey, let's get James all around publicity. James, number 1 in the world, and I'm going on TV shows, and I'm going to get on fucking Graham Norton. I'm sweating mayonnaise. No, you're all right, man. It's not that deep. FPL Planet says, hi James, hope you're well. Would you do Isak to Watkins for free? Currently ranked to around 1 million, need to chase. Intending to dead end 29, only have Trent and Salah as other blankers. I'm going to skip that, mate. Someone asked a very similar question earlier about kind of moving Isak to Watkins now when I discussed it then. Marv FPL says, hello James, hope you're well. What are your thoughts on Marlon Ramsey or Tielemans to replace Sarr this week? My budget is 5.8 and I already have Rodgers, or would you move for Dango? Cheers. Yeah, I prefer Dango. I think under that, again, consider how long you might need for. But I just think with any of them Villa players, you're potentially walking into a problem. And it's going to cost you another transfer. So Tielemans, sure, stays in the team. I don't think there's much doubt about that. But possibly a deeper role at the moment. I'm not in love with that. What's the impact of Asensio and Rashford on Ramsey, Marlon? We haven't got the information. That's the reality. I think of the two, if you had to pick one, clearly for me, Ramsey over Marlon. Because I think if Watkins is available, I don't think Marlon starts, actually. I'm pretty confident Jacob Ramsey would start tomorrow. So definitely Ramsey over Marlon if you did have to make that call. Kareem Attia says, I'm thinking of Jota and Emery in and Gordon and Slot out, -4. Jota, done this path, mate. Not for me, personally. Patrick Benjaminson says, hi James, would you get in Rodgers for Gordon knowing I have to take a -4 before game week 29 to get him out again? Or get Dango, Tara or Trossard and don't take a hit before 29? Already got Cliver. You got to think as well, Patrick, on your path to 29 as kind of, an example being, say, me with Nicholas Jackson now. I did a video for advanced tier patrons on Wednesday looking at me keeping Nicholas Jackson up to game week 34. We might not fucking play again between now and then, so games change and you may need to take a hit for something else to deal with something else, i.e. your opinion changes, form changes, injury, suspension. You kind of got to factor in that there's probably another one to come, right? Is Rodgers worth it? Well, I guess it might even lie in terms of what use for you is Rodgers in 27-28. You happy with that? Palace away, Brentford away. Rodgers, I think, is cuttable immediately after this game week. But for someone like me who's basically owned all season from 5.0, how much am I getting out of it actually moving it on? Maybe not a lot, but I don't think he's one who comes through 29 with me. And I keep thinking that's just like, attack Bournemouth at the right point. But if I didn't do it in 26... and I'm obviously not doing it now, then it probably would be a wait till 29. So I probably wouldn't, Patrick. It probably wouldn't for me personally. KP says, hi James, I played triple caps in 24. I'm thinking I should save my assistant manager for game week 36 in case there is a double there. Any thoughts? Also well played and avoiding Havertz after I got him in game week 24. Havertz was never really on the table for me, I don't think, mate. Yeah, I covered on 36 before. I don't mind the idea of holding it, right? But we can't be sure what's going to happen. There's no point me bullshitting anyone. GV Subramanyam says, Eze to any other midfielder who can do well this game week, not Bournemouth. I have Dango already. Still be Bournemouth, mate. What's wrong with having two of them? And to be honest, unless Oliver Glasner gives you real reason for concern, I'd just be playing Eze this week. Roseanne says, is Cunha at deep position for Wolves? There is a chance Strand Larson is back this weekend. That's a possibility. I haven't got the information as yet. I mean, Cunha, yes, is going to be left-sided forward, but it's probably his best position, so I don't have concerns. Craig Boy Crook says, hello, James. Love seeing your face on the telly on Friday. Reminds me the weekend is imminent. Keep up the good work. We all love you in a platonic FPL way. Only platonic? Strange. Thank you, mate. Damo Anderson says, hi, James. I know you have done a chip pod, but want to know personally what you would do in my position. Sitting with 3 Liverpool, 2 Villa, chips left, 3 hit, and assistant manager. When would you use the 2 chips? Thank you. As it stands, I wouldn't be using any of them anytime soon, and I'd be making the decision after the FA Cup quarterfinals. And locking in at the point before deadline a game with 31, whether I'm going to go assistant manager 31, 33, and then 3 hit 34 later, or if I was going to 3 hit 33 and then have assistant manager across the final 5 game weeks. You don't have to lock that decision in now. That's the important message here. Is I think for most people, unless they are truly got huge coverage of the 4 teams that are going to blank in 29, I'm really talking about having the likes of Munoz and Mateta as well on top of the other 3 teams. Then I think at this moment, most people should continue to work as if they are going to move through game week 29. If that decision changes between game week 27 and 28, that is fine. But I think that should ideally be the goal, is to try and go through it. And that should remain the same for yourself with what you've got. You do not therefore need to commit to how you are playing those chips at the end as yet. I'm going to have wildcard and assistant manager left, right? There's no commitment. I answered earlier in the stream in terms of what I would do in principle if I had all the chips left. But the only one I've committed to there prior to 29 is using the triple captaincy now. So if I did end up changing that order afterwards, it's not a problem. You do not have to commit to it at this moment. Dermot Whelan says, morning James, any news on Concert and who to replace him with if he's out already on free Liverpool? Not as yet. Unai Emery's press conference is 2 o'clock. I don't imagine that he'll be available based on what I saw with my eyes at Villa Park of him bashing the ground. It's normally kind of a giveaway sign, isn't it? So don't think he was bashing the ground because he had a bruised shin, mate. Right, I'm going to cover 3 more because it's 10:29. Woodstock Chris says, hi James, hope you're well. Would you take a hit to go Bruno to Cliver? This gives me funds to get an assistant manager in. Played triple captain last week, already used my bench boost, or save assistant manager for 30 through 36. Doubles, cheers, mate. There is, if you've already used the bench boost, there is greater reason to potentially hold on to that assistant manager chip. Whereas for those who do still have it, I understand the will to want to use it more now. So I'd be waiting, mate. And therefore the answer would be no. I'd hold on to Bruno. Bruno, you might not see it now, mate. You might be captaining him in game week 29. Jakub Chermak says, hi James, would you start Mikolenko or Hall if my goalkeeper is Pickford, or I can bring in Howson for Greaves? Mikolenko or Hall, but I have one free transfer. Other defenders are Gabriel and Trent. I would strongly be considering Greaves to Howson. I think Greaves isn't going to be of huge use to you moving forward. Yeah, I can play him 29 against Wood. You might have Wood, that might be contradictory. So yeah, Howson in, play him. That carries for a really good period. I quite like that personally. And last one, Fancy Fluke says, morning James, which podcast do you talk about your team and your thoughts? I always listen to this one on your deadline. Normally you and Suj early in the week. So I do a piece of content for the advanced tier patrons on our Patreon network every Wednesday called the Midweek Dilemma, which is just a solo piece from me. It's normally sort of 20 to 30 minutes where I talk about plans in terms of mine for transfers and how I'm thinking about manipulating through future game weeks, which obviously when this Wednesday's in fairness can go in the bin because it had Keeper Jackson as part of that plan. So I need to rethink that strategy now. And as said, and it's the honest answer, I haven't come to a decision on what to do yet, but that's something that gets released for advanced tiers. That's in podcast and video format nearly every Wednesday, and I imagine it will be this coming Wednesday as well. If you do want to support the show, it's www.patreon.com/planetfpl. Do it because you want the additional content or because you want to support the show. Mine and Such Differential Show, our detailed game week 27 preview podcast, should be available for patrons from intermediate plus tier and above from around about 12:30 today, I would say. But it just leaves me to say to everyone, play it your way this week. If there's anyone's question I haven't covered, feel free to at me on Blue Sky or Twitter. Please do it as early as possible though, because it is a Friday deadline. So if you leave it late, there's a strong possibility I'm going to miss it later in the day. But feel free to tag me. Happy to answer your questions there. As I say, if you want to support the show, www.patreon.com/planetfpl. For the benefit of those on the audio, Suj will be back with me for the Game Review podcast on Monday. For those on YouTube, smash a like, hit the sub. Deadline stream is today at 5:30 p.m. For the benefit of those on the audio, cue music, please, Manchild.